Hello and welcome to the 2020 Bendigo Invention and Innovation Festival. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to leaders and elders past, present and emerging. Today's session, Leadership, the People Who Make Things That Matter, is brought to you by contributors Sharp and Able and Barca Trailers. Our first guest today is Melissa Kirby, lawyer, strategist and founder of Sharp and Able. Prior to founding her legal and strategy firm, Melissa had an amazing career as a lawyer working for a global manufacturing and technology company, an Australian utility company, and in private practice, specialising in cross-border dispute resolution in the Asia-Pacific region. Given that vast range of experience, Melissa is perfectly suited to discuss the topic of quiet leadership stories, leading the people who make things that matter. As we face one of the greatest tests ever and see some extreme leadership qualities displayed in response to COVID-19, we've started looking towards scientists, engineers and technologists for guidance and advice, the quiet achievers. I'm pleased to welcome Melissa today to talk us through why that is and answer the question, do we have to be loud and divisive as a leader to succeed? Melissa, welcome and thank you for your time today.
Thanks very much, Alicia. I'm really pleased to be here to join BIIF, even though I'm all the way over in Melbourne.
Yes, you're in lockdown in stage 4 down there. We're in stage 3 up here. But the wonders of the internet have brought us together. So thank you.
Aren't we lucky?
Aren't we? We are absolutely lucky. So thank you for your time. You've chosen the topic of quiet leadership stories. What made you choose that and why should we be listening to these leaders now and looking to them?
Well, Alicia, the thing is, there's been so much written about leadership and everybody talks about leadership. I thought, we're in this time of crisis right now. Who are the people who are really doing the things that matter? And I'm really lucky. I get to work with this great bunch of people. They're my clients. Apparently, they even pay me to work with them. They're amazing. And they do the things that actually get us through this crisis, Alicia. And one of the things I noticed is that they aren't the sort of leaders that everybody seems to associate with the word leadership. Mm-hmm. They're the quiet types. And I just wanted to tell a little bit of their story today.
So we've obviously seen, we've got lots of different leaders around the world. You've got your political leaders, you've got leaders in the army, you've got leaders in sport, all those sorts of things. But we're starting to now think about, the scientists and the technologists and why they're so important. As you say, or have said in your notes here that, 200 years ago or 50 years ago, we would have looked to God. Maybe 20 or so years ago, we'd looked to our politician. And now we're looking to science. We're looking for fact to help us get through.
Absolutely, Alicia. The thing about the crisis that we have today is that we are so much more technologically advanced. I can join you, even though we're in lockdown, and that's just part of what I mean by the leaders who we need in this crisis. The people who we need are the people who know how to actually make and do the things that matter. I just want to actually, if I can, give a little plug to the guys in the Bendigo Manufacturers Group, because I think they are exactly the sort of people who I'm talking about. Now, the sort of things that they do, for example, both you and I are now in some sort of building in our homes or in a hall. If one of the manufacturers in the Bendigo Manufacturers Group wasn't making what they make, trusses, you and I wouldn't have that roof over our head. The other thing is, with this whole COVID-19 business, right? Obviously, scientists, they need to test the virus and they need to do a lot of testing to figure out what this little bug that's putting us all in lockdown can actually do. And there's another firm in the Bendigo Manufacturers Group that makes the probes that makes that possible.
We are really lucky here in Victoria and in Bendigo to have, such great minds at work that are helping us get through our day-to-day, to have the roof over our head, right down to now, obviously, applying their very specific skills to a massive problem that's, not only in our community in Australia, but right around the world. So what makes these leaders then different from other leaders? Because they probably don't see themselves quite as leaders, perhaps in their business or amongst their work colleagues, but really right now, they're the leaders we need more than anything else.
Absolutely, Alicia. I think what makes these folks different from our traditional leaders, first of all, they don't wear black polo necks and they don't necessarily have, big stages and lots of paparazzi around them. But the thing that really hits me is this. They have this really quiet, unshakable belief in themselves. And that faith in themselves, that unrockability, as it were, doesn't need more announcement. It doesn't need lots of fanfare. Instead, these people, these quiet leaders, they just go forward and make and do things that actually matter. They make those probes. They get that PPE out there. They're the sort of people that we're looking for. So I guess, Alicia, the way I would put it is this. Most of the traditional leaders expect you to know who they are and might have a bit of an entourage around them. But the quiet leaders I'm talking about, they probably look something like your next door neighbour. And if you can remember back to when you were allowed to have a barbecue, they're probably like the guy or gal who you bumped into at that barbecue. They're not big, paparazzi-filled, glamorous types. They've just got this quiet, unshakable belief that they can do things that matter. So I think that's the first thing that really strikes me, Alicia, when we talk about quiet leaders. They don't have that sort of star quality necessary, but they do have this deep and unshakable belief in themselves. And that is a perfect bedrock when we're talking about times of crisis.
As you say, the first thing that comes to mind with a quiet leader is someone that just has that unbelievable faith in their own abilities and capabilities. So what do you exactly mean by that? How do they demonstrate that to their team or to our community? How do we know that they're on the right track and they're people that we should be following? Because they're probably not singing from the rooftops and telling everyone how great they are.
Great question, Alicia. This is about spotting the wild, spotting quiet leaders in the wild, as it were. If they're not shouting from the rooftops, how do we know? And how do we know when somebody's actually a quiet leader? I guess the best answer I can give to you is a bit of a story and an example. So one of the quiet leaders I have the privilege of working with is the leader and the founder of a $35 million services business. Now, Gordon started his first job when he was age 10. He had a paper run. So a lot of young people now might not know what a newspaper is and that there was such a thing as a paper run.
That's probably quite true, actually. I think there's probably not many kids doing that anymore. No, you're quite right.
Exactly. So, a lot of us, like when we were little, the first way you could get pocket money other than, hassling your mum and dad for it was to actually get a paper run, and you could walk around with a bunch of papers. And so Gordon, this amazing leader who I've had the privilege of working with, he started his first paper run at age 10. Now, he did that. And by age 16, he was actually running the newsagents during the summer because the newsagent wanted to take a bit of time off. So he was telling these people who were a lot older than him what to do, and he was the boss. So I remember him telling me that straight out of school, he went to work in a job that his mum had found, and he didn't know what it was. So he went and worked in this job, and he did an engineering degree part-time, and he did so well that by age 25, he actually had 300 people working for him, Alicia. I mean, a 25-year-old, I don't know many 25-year-olds who have 300 people working for them.
Yeah, they would be very overwhelmed, I would think, if that was just anybody else.
Exactly. And even though he had achieved all of this, and he was doing really well at such a young age, he saw that things could be done better in this industry. And so, despite the fact that he had 3 kids and a wife at that time, he actually quit his job and set out to change the industry. Now, this isn't like something that you make a movie about, and it's not something that is brave or necessarily courageous. It was simply that quiet and unshakable belief in his own abilities to change the industry. And, that's one of the things that I've seen in so many of these leaders, Alicia. So, Gordon, who I just spoke about, he's not the kind of guy who's going to like dominate the room and assume that you know who he is. He's actually a really quiet guy, and he's just as happy on the shop floor talking to his workers as he is in the boardroom. So if we're looking for quiet leaders in the wild, I think we've got to observe and listen carefully. And you'll see that rock solid confidence that they have in their own abilities.
Even though they're quite quiet about the way that they go about being leaders, clearly this person in particular, Gordon, has natural leadership abilities, obviously from that very young age of then, running the news agents, then moving to being 25 and having 300 employees work for him. These people, though, generally have those leadership qualities in them. They're just not super showy about it.
I think you could certainly say that, Alicia. Whether Gordon had those naturally or whether he learnt them, he certainly got them early. I don't think that everybody is necessarily going to be having 300 people work for them at age 25. But that's not the point. It's about that, unshakable belief in himself, and that he's going out to change an industry, which, when he started in the job, it was just a newspaper clipping that his mum had found and said, hey, get out of the house and go and do something with yourself.
Yeah,
and he managed to, yeah, exactly. And he's thinking, man, we can do this well, but I can do it even better. There's another guy who I just thought I'd share this story with you as well. Just because I've got heaps of stories to tell Alicia about this, so I promise not to go on and on. But Gordon's not an exception amongst quiet leaders. There's another guy who I've had the privilege of working with, Steve, and when he first started working, he works for the largest firm in that industry. So he worked his way up the corporate ladder because he was pretty ambitious even at a young age. And so his boss asked him to set up a new part of the business. So what Steve did is he looked around the company and he said, okay, these are the people I want in my new business. So he persuaded people to move from Queensland, from New Zealand, all over over to Sydney so that he could have them on his team. Now, obviously, his team all moved to Sydney and they brought their families with them, they bought houses, and at that point, the company was taken over. So the new, this is just, it was just incredible. The new owners at that time decided to cut all of the businesses under a threshold amount. And obviously, because Steve's business was just a newbie, it was just a fledgling, that included his business.
But I guess what you've sort of talked about today is that those quiet leaders have that amazing ability to dig in. And
exactly.
So when something like this happens, what do those leaders then do?
Well, Steve's story is a fantastic case study about this. So obviously his whole team, who have just moved themselves and their families all the way from different states or even countries to be in Sydney to work for him, are facing redundancy. So he doesn't just keel over, he actually offers to take the business over from the new owners.
That is incredible.
You could say the guy's mad, but
at that point, someone might think he might be.
But he just had that quiet confidence about him, and he just kept turning up every day. So because he was a new business, obviously he didn't have a credit history or anything. So he's got to get suppliers to back him, and there was only one supplier who would back him. And so he went with that supplier. But then he found out that supplier was ripping him off. to about 25%.
He's having a lot of bad luck, this bloke.
Yeah, exactly. So, first, the new owners actually cut his whole business off. Then he buys it off and hopes to keep his team members all employed and keep everybody shipshape. And then he finds a supplier who'll back him, but then they're ripping him off. So when he goes and asks them about it, they just stop supplying him.
He has an amazing sense of drive and responsibility at this point as well for his workers.
Exactly.
And I would say a deep level of care for his business, for himself, but also for them, because, they have just, moved their whole lives for, his business. So how does he then, get back on his feet and support them because, they've invested in making that big change in their life?
Exactly, Alicia. I think this is the second thing that I've noticed about quiet leaders. Not only that unshakable faith in themselves, but they're tenacious to the point of being stubborn.
And that is a big stubbornness there. But he almost had to be. He really had no choice.
Exactly. And like Steve, he said to me, he just kept showing up and solved problem after problem after problem. And that's one of the things about quiet leaders. They're tenacious, they're often stubborn, their families must think they're crazy, but they just keep showing up. The degree of that tenaciousness, you can't underestimate it, Alicia.
In your experience, and you've had a vast amount of experience in your legal profession, in your career, what made you curious about these quiet leaders in the beginning? Is it because they were the leaders that most resonated with you? When you look back on your career, are they the ones that you really look to as the shining light to I guess, perhaps emulate, or even just in the very least follow and want to do the best job that you could for those people, for those quiet leaders?
Yeah, great question, Alicia. I guess when I hear leadership, and I remember as a young lawyer going through the ranks, I thought, and being in a corporate career, I thought, wow, I looked at all the people around me and I thought, I'm not sure I want to grow up to be like them. Maybe I'm a little bit of a renegade, but
that didn't sit well with you.
It didn't. I'm not one of those people who get up there and say, hey, look at me, aren't I fantastic?
You're not doing a tap dance for them.
No, that's just not me. And so I thought, how can I do the best that I possibly can and get to the top? But do I really have to be like that? Do I have to be the person who stands in front of a camera and dominates and, wears the power suits and everything? And you know what? I'm really lucky because I've worked with some of the best people in the best companies in the world, and I've found these quiet leaders.
Does that tell you then that there's a place for everybody when it comes to quiet leadership? That, there can only be so many showy people in one organisation, but for yourself, you've obviously found that being a quiet leader in your own right, that there is a place for quiet leaders, and organisations respond to those people just as much as they do the ones that are front and centre and in the limelight.
I do think that there is a place for quiet leaders. And in fact, during this very difficult and trying time, this time of crisis that we are going through right now, it's the quiet leaders who are the ones who are doing things that really help us get through. I think just this morning I read an article that really put it nicely. So they were looking for the person of the year in New Zealand, I think it was, and there's a big call out for Dr. Bloomfield, the Chief Medical Officer, and somebody, as a bit of a laugh, put the Dr. Bloomfield fan club. And
they are having fan clubs, these chief officers, these doctors, they're getting massive followings.
Exactly. And, before they knew it, they had 50,000 followers. And this is a perfect example of what I mean by a quiet leader. They know their stuff. They are really stubborn and they're really tenacious. They just keep turning up and it pays dividends. It's not just about being showy and having 10 million followers on Twitter. I do think that quiet leadership has a place.
Who are the quiet leaders that you look to today? I mean, we've probably seen the rise of our Chief Health Officer in Victoria, Brett Sutton. Someone's put his face all over some masks, probably not what he expected, or on a bed sheet or on some socks. I know that there's been some people doing that. That's probably not what he expected when he took on the Chief Health Officer role, but in his leadership and leading our state through a pandemic, he's probably a good example of a quiet leader, and putting our trust and faith in someone who has the understanding and the science to back up what he's saying.
Yeah. Personally, I see the quiet leaders amongst my clients every day. I won't name names for confidentiality reasons, but they're the ones who inspire me, because they're the people who are making sure that our buildings are safe, that we can get PPE to the front line, to the people who really are making the difference amongst us, and who are doing the research to come up with solutions that's actually based on fact and on good science. So they're the people that I look to, not necessarily the noisy ones.
Fair enough. You mentioned earlier in your talk, our chat today, about your connection with the Bendigo Manufacturing Group and some of the work that you've done there. Could you share with our audience what that work has involved, and how impressed you've been with what you've seen in the regions?
Bendigo Manufacturers Group is an amazing group of people who are doing things and making things that matter, as I said. I've had the pleasure of visiting a lot of their facilities and actually witnessing firsthand what it is they do. I strongly recommend anyone who has the opportunity to go to Bendigo to visit and actually see not just the beautiful place that Bendigo is, and try the wonderful food that Bendigo is becoming quite famous for, but actually see the things that people make. I think Paul Chapman, who heads up Australian Turntables, he's not shy.
No, he's not shy.
Yeah, Paul is part of that group, and Australian Turntables is part of that group. As an example, Australian Turntables, they make turntables and most people don't know about them. But the next time you look at a car showroom and you see a car turning around, it's on a turntable. If you go to a revolving restaurant, it's actually on a turntable, and you make them there in Bendigo.
Exactly.
And it's one of the very few places in the world that they're made.
Yeah, supermarkets where the trucks drive in and drive straight back out front way, so they never have to reverse and try and manage that and potentially put people in danger. Yes, all those that invention has come from the Australian Turntable Company.
Exactly.
Thank you for that reflection on Bendigo and those very kind words about our city. Just to wrap up our chat today, what makes you optimistic about the future, about quiet leadership and the way that our world is starting to recognise and celebrate these people?
I'm optimistic because I think time and time again, human beings have shown that we're bloody tough. It's pretty hard to kill us off. And we have gone through much more difficult times than this before. We've gone through war. And if we think that 6 weeks in lockdown is tough, people in the Second World War had to go through rations and bombing every day for 4 years. So it's going to take a lot more than this to get us down. That's what I think.
I think you're quite right. I agree. I think we're doing the very best we can. We've got people working to keep us safe, and as a community we just have to keep responding and doing what we need to do. So we thank you so much, Melissa, for your time today, for shining a much needed spotlight on quiet leadership and its ability to combine, I guess, compassion and pragmatism to drive innovation. So we thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
My pleasure completely, Alicia. Thank you.
Lovely to meet you. Our next guest is Simon Meadows. He has had experience as a senior executive and director over a broad career that has focused on culture development and change management. Today, he is the CEO of Barca Trailers. His topic is leveraging our greatest asset, people. For him, people and effective communication are key, especially when navigating change. We couldn't be going through much more change than we are right now, but with it brings a great opportunity to innovate. So it is my pleasure to welcome Simon to talk to us about the practical tips for driving effective employee engagement at this time. Simon, welcome, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks very much, Alicia. It's great to be a part of the festival. I look forward to sharing some insights and thank you.
Yeah, we welcome your experience and you sharing that with us today. So I'll hand over to you now and join you for the end at the end for some questions.
Thanks. Catch up soon. Welcome. Thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity to be a part of the festival, and I look forward to sharing some insights that I have from several businesses and over my journey of leadership through change, and in particular with a focus on people and leveraging our greatest asset, people. I'm going to be taking you through a discussion about culture, the role of people within culture and within organisations, the leadership that's critical as part of leading the culture, and the change journey that we need to go through. What you can see here is an image of the Barca Trailers team and one of our products, a walking floor trailer that was proudly presented at a national truck show. And there's no coincidence that the text and imagery on the side of that trailer actually highlight the things that we're so proud of, that we are so focused on within the organisation, being culture, the investment in people, the focus on customer, being authentic and innovating. This is an image from obviously pre-COVID times and a little while ago, but these are things that are key that we hold dearly as we continue to go through our change journey moving forward. So, Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Personally, I couldn't agree more. Irrespective of what strategy you have, what actions, what processes, what systems, what personnel with insights and knowledge and all of these things that can add great value to your direction and your achievement of your goals. At the end of the day, if you don't have a culture across the organisation that is engaging, collaborative, constructive, it actually undermines the strategy and any of those other processes and systems and endeavours that you have. So I'd like to share a little bit more on that culture story and direction. What is your culture? It's critical that you ask that. And it's also critical that you get the perspective of who's saying what that culture is. You can have your own perspective. The leaders may have their perspective, shareholders, the board. But across the board, it is critical to understand the perception of the people who are forming that culture, and that is your broader organisation. And to do that, there's several ways, but in principle, you need to ask, you need to listen, you need to be able to do it in an open and honest way, in a way that it's not defensive and that people can share their insights without fear. So it can be a confidential survey, or you pick an option that suits you. What you find is you will get a snapshot of where that culture sits by asking the question, how do you view our culture in relation to a list of particular criteria, and have them to gauge that positively, negatively, etc. There's a mix of positive and negative attributes to a culture, and typically they all play a role. What you can see in the word clouds here is that, for example, is seen to be in the past or maybe a current state culture when you've asked that question. And often in cultures that are maybe negative or lacking leadership, you can see the type of items that are coming through here. Negative mindsets, blame culture, living in the past, backstabbing, poor behaviour, attitude, etc. Maybe a dictatorial environment. And the words that are highlighted large are those that are most resonating with the feedback from participants. So they're the ones that are the strongest in terms of the perception. And then look at, well, what is your ideal culture, or where do you see the culture now as we're trending forward, if it's a survey that's conducted along the journey? And ideally, you'll start to see more of those positive engagement items start to come through. Building partnerships, being treated fairly, engaged in work, emphasising teamwork, new ideas, proud to be a part of. It's critical to get this understanding because perception is reality. And while you may perceive that things are great, or the outcomes might be what you're desiring, is it really optimum in terms of what can be achieved through a positive culture? Often it's identified that there's a need for change with culture, especially if those negative traits are so pronounced. So it's critical to help people understand the need for change. And as Charles Darwin once said, it is the most adaptable to change that are most likely to survive. And so understanding that need for change and what it actually means for the people across the organisation who need to change their behaviour, change their process, change the way they engage with people, support people, lead people, all of those things isn't always readily in their mindset. And so it's actually sharing insights, sharing information, data, trends, examples, facts, and communicate these things as frequently and as openly and transparently as possible so that it can be seen that there is a need for change and what is possible in the event of change. Quite often people say, but what, do we need to share all of that data, all of that fine detail in terms of maybe confidential data, things like that? If you're not prepared to do that, find a way to share it so that you're actually presenting charts or visuals that at least give an understanding of the situation. Maybe give examples that everyone can relate to rather than some of the more technical material, and make it manageable to understand. Another opportunity is perhaps to get key influencers together, as I've done in the past, and ask them to literally, on a plain piece of paper, draw their vision of how they see the organisation now. I've identified 3 here. That was out of a group of about 12 people. I've just selected 3, and they physically drew their mindset of the vision of how they saw the organisation or the culture at a point in time. Then have a discussion about what great would look like and where we would like to be, and then give the same opportunity to then draw where do we want to be. And you can see the same people have drawn the corresponding picture, and you can see from the top 3 versus the bottom 3 that in this instance it's gone from maybe a more messy or cluttered or challenging environment, confused, to a more structured process, understood, and a situation where people are aware of their role. Perhaps one of my favourite images of this type that I've seen is that bottom right there with the boat or the yacht. Everyone has a role to play. There's some headwinds and some storms. Not everything's perfect. There's always going to be challenges, but at the same time, you know, there's the bright and the good times. Each person on the boat has a role to play. They're supporting each other. At the end of the day, there's an anchor there. You can stop, you can assess, reset. And people often say, what's the person falling off the boat? Well, not everyone is always up for the change and is always up for the journey. And you need to be able to reflect on that and identify if they would like to move on or if you need to manage accordingly so that you ensure that you have the right group to move forward. A more formal method is potentially to go to a group such as Human Synergistics. I've worked with a leader's impact over the journey in a variety of organisations, but again, asking similar question, where are we now versus where do we want to be? And where are we now? You can see in both of these, the blue is a more constructive set of leadership styles or behaviours within a culture. And the blue in the where are we now was not as prominent versus where we would like it to be. So obviously those other items, the red and the green, which are more aggressive or defensive behaviours, passive or avoidant behaviours, all of which are part of a culture. And it's about then going on the journey of increasing the exposure and the impact of constructive behaviours and reducing or limiting the impact of those other behaviours. It takes time to go on this journey, and in 25 minutes, we're covering it a lot. It takes several years, but it is critical that you share the vision and that you map that journey for the people across the whole organisation, and in particular, the leadership group are on board with leading and driving in this journey. And share the journey through from the current state, updating what the drivers and influences are as we go, communicating all the way, developing and supporting people and each other, and bringing that culture to life, and reflecting and refining as we go on the journey. It's critical to start with values and behaviours, and if you don't have them, or if yours are dated and aren't clear, refresh them. It's critical to have behaviours that underpin that culture that you are seeking to drive. They can be your values and behaviours. They don't have to be anybody else's, but collectively as a group of influencers and ask from your broader personnel, you'll see it from your past versus ideal in terms of culture, some of the things that need greater focus, and have that as your base to move forward and work with people, develop people, and grow as an organisation. But start with the leadership, and don't expect that everyone else is going to go on this change journey, but not you or not the leadership team. We can't have us versus them. There needs to be a real reflection on yourself and the leadership team from the outset. As the image highlights here, apply your own oxygen mask first, then assist others. You need to be prepared and engaged and committed to challenge yourself as a leader and as a leadership team that you are going to lead with the aspirational behaviours of the culture that you're looking to create and continue into the future. And be committed to that. Be consistent in your approach. The standard that you walk past is the standard that you accept, as described by Lieutenant General Morrison. There can't be a place for double standards. You need to ensure that the leadership that you expect is the leadership that yourself and others across the organisation are actually adhering to. You can't have different rules for different people and different scope. If you are walking past things that you know are not in the right cultural fit, behavioural fit or expectation, and you walk past and accept that, then in effect you're saying you're undermining all of the expectation around the rest of the culture. So strive for collaboration and continued commitment to a consistent culture, and eliminate any us versus them. And through employee engagement, surveys, as I've discussed, other means, asking through toolbox sessions, different meetings and forums, barbecue sessions, whatever it may be, reflect and understand the areas of focus and try and simplify it. There'll be hundreds, there'll be lots of items, but pick out those that are resonating the most and identify what you seek to stop doing, start doing, and keep doing. From a stop doing perspective, it is critical because typically they are negative and they are having the greatest impact on your culture. And in particular, they typically create risk. So you can see from this example, negativity, criticising or blame culture, gossip, shortcuts, and maybe controlling behaviour versus the more constructive start doing and often they're a complement to each other, and that is problem solving, encouragement, being open to change, sharing in the leadership, taking time, supporting, moving through. And obviously those things that are working well, continue to maintain those. Clarify and establish as a leadership team. This takes time, and I've brought together groups of key leaders across organisations. If you're not comfortable doing it, have an independent facilitator support you on the journey to identify the positive engagement and behaviours that you wish to portray as a leadership team, and also have the courage to identify the negative and actually highlight those and put them into a framework of above the line, which is positive, and below the line, which is negative, and be able to have a framework that you can call out. So when you fall into poor behaviour or old habits, you can call it out for each other as leaders. Hang on, that was below the line. Let's get above the line. It takes a lot of the complexity out to simply have that above and below the line behavioural approach. I encourage you to have those collaboration sessions where you can have those open discussions and set that framework to move forward. In a similar way, focus on what we will do, and focus on the we, not us or them or I in particular. Focus on we. We will communicate effectively. We will encourage. We will be honest. We will focus on learnings from mistakes, etc. And also focus on what we won't do. We won't rush. We won't shut down. And we won't be sarcastic, etc. So again, above, positive, below, negative, and it sets a framework to stop and call out negative behaviour. And you need to have the courage to do so. And you need to have the courage that you will be called out also. And to be honest, there's nothing better as a leader who's driving change in this way to be called out, because it highlights that you're encouraging the behaviour to shift in the right direction. And it is a great reflection to stop and identify, because we all can fall into prior behaviours or traits under pressure. Build trust and accountability. It's critical that there is transparency, that you share information, you don't hide things, you are open, and you find a way of ensuring that people are able to ask for information should they require it, and that you share it. There is no question that can't be answered. As I said, you may not go into fine detail, but you at least need to provide a framework for understanding. And do not avoid the challenges or the barriers in the organisation. Call out the elephant in the room. We've all done it, been in meetings, been in organisations where we know things that are just not right or are critical to the outcome, yet people don't stop to identify it and work on that issue because it's too hard, it's too challenging, it relates to a certain individual, etc. Be strong to call out the elephant in the room. And personally, I've had it on meeting agendas to call, are there any elephants before we leave the room? Are there any elephants before we move on? I've even had boardrooms with an elephant as an icon on the actual table, just as a reminder to bring out those key challenges and ensure that we move forward. Continuing to build trust and accountability, you need to be credible and reliable and ensure that others believe that we will do what we say we will. We need to be realistic and have the capability to do what we say we will. And others need to believe that we can do what we commit to and have true intent, and that the team and the group that we're moving with all understand and believe in what we stand to achieve. Some real basics here, and it's we all grow up with sport, and it's in our lives around our culture that we live. But there's so much in sport that is just taken for granted and everyone adheres to and expects, and yet we don't always apply it to business. For example, setting targets, defining roles, delegating and empowering others to carry out their role. Effective measurement regularly, quarter time, half time, runners going out to engage and follow up on where change is needed. Focus on the performance, the overall outcome, not just existing, not just playing the game, actually what we're endeavouring to achieve. And working together and supporting each other, regular feedback, celebrating milestones, whether it be the banner or a high five after an achievement. Celebrate those wins, singing the song, those type of things, develop and achieve together. And yet it has such an impact in sport and is expected, but we take it for granted that business will exist without a lot of these things. And they can be applied. Communication is key. It is critical that you share information as regularly and in as timely a manner as possible, in as clear and open and transparent forum, whether it be in smaller groups, larger groups. At the moment, it's quite challenging, but take the time. You can't get a huge group of people together right now, but have more sessions with fewer people in a safe environment to be able to ensure that the message is continuously there for everyone that you're moving forward with, and help people to understand. Don't assume that people know what you do, and don't assume that they've understood it. Ask questions in response, go back and catch up with people, seek to understand how they've understood and where they would like more support or information. It creates buy-in for what we can do. Further on communication, this is a bit of a no-brainer, and I think that a lot of people can resonate with this. We need to eliminate barriers to communication, the silos that exist between departments, between individuals. We need to break that down. Set a platform that you're engaging departments across your organisation. You're getting leaders from different segments to communicate and align collectively. And it's a pet bug of mine, but the email culture of copying 40 people on something, or but I sent you that email, that doesn't cut it. Effective communication is where you are really engaging and ensuring that your message has been heard and engaged in. Email can be a real distraction and can really add to a blame culture. Continue to lead, value and support your people. Recognise the role that every individual plays in the organisation and celebrate milestones, share the achievements. It doesn't have to be the greatest of achievement. It could be a pat on the back and a simple thanks to someone where you recognise some great effort. Those things across the organisation carried out by a broad group of leaders and supervisors can have a significant shift in the positivity of the culture. And build your employer of choice brand. You want an organisation where people want to be, love to be, and are proud to be a part of the organisation, but in particular the team and the overall organisation that you lead. Reward and recognise, as I said, it could be a pat on the back, but also recognising service, recognising the commitment that you have from people. They're not just turning up to be paid, they're sharing part of their life for you and for your organisation and the culture that you're leading. Continue to invest in training and development and the skills, and not expect that everyone is comfortable doing the same thing consistently. And celebrate diversity and inclusion, and really continue to develop and bring others into the mix who can continue to add to your overall outcomes of the organisation. It takes time. Continue to challenge and review and refine what you do, collaborate, build the framework for it, lead and support it, maintain the focus and resilience that is required to go on this journey. It does take time, as I said. Enjoy it along the way, but at the same time, stop and reflect and appreciate where you're heading. Build that momentum, think forward, adapt continuously, and build that cultural snowball. I took you through that journey at the start. That journey evolves and goes again and again, and ideally continues to build even more constructively moving forward. I thank you for your time today. I wish you all the best in your own challenges as we move through the change that we all go through, and as we continue to think about how we innovate and create a more constructive future. Enjoy the journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon, for your presentation. You've given us a lot to think about there, and I believe will be very helpful for our viewers and those, no matter what level they are in an organisation, to know how to develop a great culture where they work. We've got some questions, so we'll dive right into those. You say that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So how do you know if you have a good culture, and how can you continually test that and make sure that it's working just as you would want it to?
Look, I think it's key that you are open to understanding the culture first and foremost. You need to be prepared to take on board the feedback that comes from the organisation and the perspectives, as I spoke about, that others within the organisation have. If you're not prepared to take that on board, then you will never know. You need to be open to reflect and understand that. In terms of the testing, it is you can carry it out in various ways. It could be literally seeing it around you, what's constructive, what's positive, what's negative. But it is great if you can have a structure where you can survey all of your personnel and potentially your customers and other environments around to get that information. As I said, there will be positive and negative to that culture. And then if you don't have the skill to do so, potentially get support from an external body that can help you frame the questioning and the weighting and things like that so that you can effectively measure that. There are tools, and I spoke about some of them, and there are many organisations that have their tools to be able to measure in finer detail, such as human synergistics and taking that shift from a more defensive culture to a more positive one. But it does take time and significant investment. But at a high level, if you're honest with yourself as a leadership team, you'll know whether or not you've got an effective culture or not.
Yes, that genuine process is so important when you start to embark on building a great culture within a team. And yes, there are lots of, I guess, methods for measuring culture, but nothing beats being in the business at different levels of the business and starting to really see it firsthand how the day-to-day plays out for your staff.
Sure.
Our next question is, how do you persuade those who are reluctant to move forward with you? And how do you help them perhaps out of the organisation in a caring way if they don't agree with the path that you're on?
Look, I think that it is key to ensure that you've given everyone the opportunity to understand, and you've given them tools and information, and you've been transparent in understanding the need for change or the need for commitment to a particular process. You will get personnel who simply do not understand and they need more support. And quite often with that support and even greater guidance can go on that journey in a really constructive way, which is great. But in some instances you won't. You will have people that are that steadfast in their own view or perspective, and it is out of whack with the expectation, out of whack with even many of their peers. And you then have to have some pretty open and honest discussions, and that may lead to them self-identifying that this isn't a place for them, or you go on the journey of continuing to manage their values and behaviours and their output in line with those and take the action as required. As I touched on briefly in the presentation, not everyone will be on the bus or on the boat for the whole journey for various reasons. But it is critical to ensure that those that are wanting to continue to grow and develop and add the value are supported, rather than allow some who can be more negative or toxic to overpower the general purpose.
All right, so the next question is, how do you make sure that your senior leaders are signed up for change? So as, the CEO in the organisation, you're looking at your leadership team around you, how do they, support you in your role? And then how do you get them to share your message amongst their staff and filter it down through the organisation?
As I touched on, it is critical to start with the senior leaders and that they are signed up, as this question's highlighted. Put that oxygen mask on yourselves before you move in and expect everyone else to go on the journey, because it's in that phase that you actually create an environment within the leadership team that there is that ability to be vulnerable and to challenge each other, because not everyone's going to all be aligned. They'll still have their own backgrounds and baggage or view and things like that. It is critical that you do spend time as a leadership group, and as I mentioned, potentially have someone independently support you with those collaboration sessions, whether it be weekly, fortnightly, monthly. You'll know the need, and because if there's not alignment within that leadership group, those across the organisation who are looking for the cracks will see that straight away, and it will create further divide and make it even harder for you to work through it. If there are individuals within that leadership group that are even more steadfast or off track with the alignment of the group, it's important that you spend the time with them and really understand why. There may be some really good foundation of knowledge within that group that everyone else is missing, and so just have that open and engaging space for that leadership.
Yes, that united front is so important, but also having getting that outside help as well can sort of really prompt you as a leadership team to really challenge you, so that you are getting to that point where you are in agreement, that everyone's on board and you can move forward. So when times are tough, like they are at the moment, a lot of people are working from home. How do you keep the team from drifting into the negative or feeling that perhaps the current situation isn't working particularly well? How do you share with staff, or what do you share with them to keep them engaged, to make sure that they're continuing to perform for you?
Look, there will always be tough times. We're obviously in a pretty extraordinary time at the moment, and that's putting great pressure on communication. But we're finding different ways to be able to communicate, and communication is key. The question, what do we share with staff? Share yourself in terms of your time and your commitment to communicate, to ask questions, to share information, and share some positives that maybe are being overlooked. There's a lot of negativity around currently, but there's also no doubt some great stories coming through, and don't be afraid to present some of the positives throughout as well. It's also an opportunity to allow a framework for even if it's small groups or others to share their thoughts or their information that you share across other departments or networks within the organisation. Quite often people become focused on what's within their own immediate space, and it's great to be able to share that as part of the whole team there is still a lot of positive happening.
To focus on the positives is really important, and that honesty from leaders as well. I think when you see people at the very top, you expect that they're just going along fine all the time, but to share that there's a roller coaster for them as well, and wherever you are in the ladder, it doesn't matter. You are experiencing those feelings, so to share them. We'll go to our final question. If you do develop a good culture and you've managed to grow your team and you've gone through perhaps some surveys and you've set those values and behaviours, how do you sustain that? How do you make sure that it continues on, even if your leaders change or your people change, that when people come into your organisation, they get that sense straight away of what that culture is and what the expectations are?
Well, that really is the key, because if the culture hasn't evolved to a point that it is sustained and that momentum from that snowball is not there, it will fall away. it will erode when leaders or others come in, either people leave or others come into the organisation, or the dynamic of the environment changes. There will always be those changes. It is critical that you've got the groundswell across the whole organisation for the commitment of that culture, of those values and behaviours and those expectations, and the capacity and honesty to call out where we are off track. Not wait for a leader to call it out, a nominated leader, but everybody has a role to play. And it is not one individual or a group of individuals. It is the broad organisation. Everyone adds value. And so over time, it does gain that momentum, to the point that then when someone goes out, someone else comes in. That's the way it is. But that way is a more constructive culture that they adapt to, and it is expected. And it is critical that when people don't understand that you spend the time with those who maybe haven't been on that full journey, so that they don't start to take others off track, that you ensure that they understand the background as we move forward as well.
Absolutely, investing in your staff and making sure that they understand the journey you're on, so they can help the others when the new ones come along, and to fit in and to continue in the way that you would like them to. Thank you for your practical advice today, Simon. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought, so we appreciate what you've been able to provide to us today. Thanks very much. It's been a great opportunity. I encourage everyone to go on the journey. It is a challenge. It is. It takes a lot of commitment. However, it is extremely rewarding, not only in terms of the enjoyment of the organisation, but also the outcomes that come from a positive culture as well. All the best. Thank you very much. Thank you to our guests, Simon Meadows, CEO of Barca Trailers, and Melissa Kirby of Sharp and Able. We've loved having your company as part of the 2020 BIIF. Our free program runs until October 2, so there's still plenty of time to be inspired by our lineup of experts. Visit our website at www.biif.com.au. That's BIIF for more information. Take care and goodbye.